Welcome once again to another action-packed episode of The Upgrade. My name is Gary Muttley. He is...
Len Carmichael, Landmine Studios. Oh, what a world. It's snowing like crazy, bro.
I know. And you may not hear this for a little bit until...
That doesn't matter.
After, but yeah, we're recording this one during the fucking blizzard. There's probably about a good 16 inches of snow outside of my front door right now.
So I'm going to tell you.
And it's still going.
Ewing has received like maybe 6 inches of snow at this point. Well, at least when I came downstairs.
Right.
It might be more now because it's been 2 hours since I've been down here. But most of the day, it was FRZ rain / snow / it was like a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
So it was just like an icy mess outside, and I broke my back open shoveling my stupid ass driveway. But when I walked away, you could pull into the driveway as if there was no fucking snow. So
nice.
I just wanted to cut down because I knew that if I let the ice sit, then when I went to shovel it tomorrow, like if it snows and it's just snow, I could blast through that in no time.
Right.
But the heavy shit, nah. I was getting that out of the way before I hit the sack tonight.
No, because you'll be sitting there chipping ice tomorrow.
I'm being traction, bro.
Oof.
I have a broken back.
You'll be chipping ice tomorrow, and then the next day you'll
using that ice on my back.
Yeah.
Just laying in the fucking yard.
Oh yeah, you'll be fucking wrecked. We're too old for the shit.
Dude, I'm too old for everything right now. Everything.
Well, like everybody's like, oh yeah, I can't wait for hardcore shows to start up again.
Fuck that.
I'm like, yeah, it'll be cool. I'll sit back and watch, but you won't see me getting busy.
There are very, very, very few bands at this point that could relinquish my mosh retirement. I'm struggling to even think of more than 2 or 3. And I know most of the bands that I'm thinking of won't play anyway, so it's not even a fucking worrisome thing. I'm good.
That makes it a little easier. It's like, yeah, these bands will get me fucking worked up, but we're getting old. They're getting old, so most of them don't really play anymore. So
so whatever.
Dodge that bullet.
Yeah, because no offense to any young kids watching this show that might be in bands or listening to this show that might be in bands, none of you get me hyped to mosh. It just doesn't happen. Sorry. It's not my thing. There's a few that are pretty good, but they're not going to get me out of mosh retirement.
I wouldn't say none.
Few. Very
few. There might
few.
be a couple, but then I realized that
I gotta go to work in the morning.
I won't be able to get up for like 3 days. I'll need help getting from my bedroom to the bathroom. And then I realized, like, yeah, you may want to reconsider this path here. And I realized that it's best for me to just take a fucking seat.
Just bow out.
Just leave that stuff for the younger folk, or I will end up in traction.
All you whippersnappers.
Yeah. When I was your age, I was drinking malt liquor and punch people in the face.
Moshed uphill both ways.
Oh my God. So we're gonna do something a little bit different, because if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you know that we kind of like to mess with the format a little bit. We will have some episodes talking about politics. We'll have some episodes talking to different people about different things, like nerdy guitar stuff. Hi, Matt. Or things like that. So we had an idea, and we're going to go with this for this episode, where we're going to examine a certain year, and that year happens to be 30 years ago, 1991. And there's a lot of stuff that happened that year related to music that we're going to talk about, because it was really a very influential year. And there were a lot of things that happened during that year that affected music long afterwards, even now, 30 years later. And some of it's really cool stuff. Some of it is really stupid stuff. And we're going to get into all of it. What do you think?
I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So I want to preface a little bit of this conversation. In 91, I had just turned 14 towards the end of 90. And for the majority of 91, I'm like 14. So, you're at that point where you've been listening to music for consciously listening to music for like 8-9 years at that point. But it's that breaking point where you're starting to like really focus on the things that are technically your music, things that like truly relate to you, and they're not things that are just passed down from your parents, things you searched out, things your friends pointed you to. And in my case, MTV was pointing me in the direction of college radio stations, because I happen to live next to TCNJ, but I also, there were a number of college radio stations that you could pick up at the time from all across the Delaware Valley.
Right.
So I'm hearing music from all different places, and 91 was definitely a formative year for me. So what I did was I went on Wikipedia. You guys can go on Wikipedia too if you want, and I looked up 1991 music releases or records or whatever. I got a list of things that came out in 91, and I didn't want to go down to the song level specifically. I just pulled out records that came out in 91, and I made a list. And on that list, I have kind of separated the things that really spoke to me one way or the other, and there's like a few ways I categorized this list. And as we go through the months, I'm going to talk about them in that style. So just so you all know, there's 80s holdovers, things I found later that I probably should have found at the time, but maybe I wasn't ready, or they just didn't come into view. There's normal course of business, meaning things that either are hip-hop related, so I would have just known about them because I was already listening to hip-hop at the time. They're, bands, hip-hop groups that would have crossed my path, or just things that I should know because they had members of stuff from the 80s or 1990 where I would know it. And then there's new blood, things that came into view that I would have never heard of before. And then there's also embarrassing listens, things that I listened to that I know now that it's embarrassing, and you know what, you're right. And then I think there might be there is one other thing, and it's the thing that I'm really good at, hating. It's the hate machine listens. Things that, even though they may have been popular, I hated them then, and I hate them now too. So that's kind of how I separated this list. Gary, what did you do?
I approached it slightly differently and made a list of music releases and also some events related to music, and made a list of some current events that'll kind of put things a little in perspective as far as what was going on at the time around the world. And I also added a few, and I was looking for more, and I'm sure there are more. They may come to me, they may not, because at that point I started going to a lot of concerts. I started a couple of years ago, but during that year, I'm sure there were a bunch, and I made notes of a few, and more might come to me. I was 16, no, let me think. Math. Oh, God, doing math in my head.
Well, what year were you born?
91. I was born in 73, so I was...
like 16 going on 17.
Yeah. So I was 16 going on 17. I was in college. For the first half of 91, I was doing college radio. And then...
maybe you were 17 going on 18.
God damn it. I had it worked out before, too, because I hate doing math off the top of my head. But,
I mean, I have a finance degree. I should be able to do math. So,
No, 17 going on 18.
Yeah, you were 17 going on 18.
We should cut this out so
No,
that nobody knows how terrible we are.
Nah, we're leaving this in.
Shit, I got to take my shoes off. But yeah, so I was doing college radio for the beginning half of that year. So I was exposed to a lot of different music. And like you said, you know, I was a little older, but there were a lot of things that were heavily influential to me that went on in this year. Because this year, and we'll get into it later, but I actually went to my very first hardcore show in 1991. So that was a major turning point for me as far as musical growth and how music related, because obviously look at, you know, playing in hardcore bands for years after that, and I wouldn't say making a living, but pretty much, you know,
you make it work.
Dedicating
your life,
large part of my life to hardcore music.
So for me, it's more about. I wouldn't say that I didn't start going to hardcore shows at that year, but it set the groundwork for me to be interested in. Right. I had already been going to concerts at that point.
Yeah,
I had gone to see, you know, Kool and the Gang with a plethora of people because of my relation to someone in the band. So I had seen concerts for, you know, basically the last 10 years prior. I'd been going since I was 4 or 5 years old. So going to a concert was not new, but going to one for a band that I, like, found myself
right
and liked, I would tie back to that, like, 89 through 92 window where I was really discovering music.
Yeah, for me it was I went to my first show, my first concert in 1988. It was a Monsters of Rock tour at Giant Stadium, and that was.
So you were about 14 years old, 15.
Yeah, it was Van Halen, the Scorpions, Dokken, Metallica, and Kingdom Come.
Which is a solid show.
Stadium show. My first show was a stadium show. It was just huge. It was like, whoa. And within a couple of weeks after that, I went to like 2 more arena shows, and that just set me on the path. Like once I started doing that, I was just hooked.
I've been hooked the whole time.
Yeah.
It's the idea of going to see a band live beats almost any other form of entertainment for me. Even now, after being in bands and riding around the country and out of the country, etc., I would rather go see a show than go to the movies or like any other form of entertainment short of riding roller coasters. For me, it's going to see bands. So
yeah,
this
I
kind of
agree.
just set me up.
Yeah, and some people will kind of shit on arena shows or whatever. I enjoy both. They're two very different experiences. You know, being in a small club, there's a lot of energy there.
Yep.
But I also really enjoy the whole arena experience too.
Well, the arena experience brings you a whole different level of appreciation for like showmanship.
Yeah.
Like, did they put together a good like visual experience to go along with the music? Like you go see Iron Maiden, and even now when they're like 900 years old, they're still running around the stage and playing and like playing off the crowd, which, you know, you just don't get that, and you can't get that in a small venue. It just wouldn't work out.
No, and listen, they're my number one of all time, and that's a big reason why they're a perfect example of why I dig the arena shows, because you see them, or you see a band like Kiss, they put on a show. They've got the lights, they've got the lasers, they've got everything.
Right.
And it's not just, you know, going to watch somebody play their songs. There's so much more to it. It's a whole performance, and it's enjoyable in its own way. It's cool to see a band in a small club just smashing shit.
Oh, of course. I mean, unbeatable overall. But the arena show is very fun as well. It's just a different type of fun.
Yeah, it's a different type of experience, and I love them both, and I'd be happy to start doing that again if this shit ever lets up.
Exactly.
So let's start down this journey of 1991. It's been 30 years now, and we're going to touch on some of this stuff. And by the way, I did something that I never do for the show, because usually I'll either have notes in my head or just kind of wing it, but I actually have paper notes that I made up, which I never do.
And I have a spreadsheet because I'm just that guy.
I was going to put it in a spreadsheet, and then I just didn't have time, and hopefully I can read my own stupid scribble, because I haven't used a writing implement in months, working from home.
Well, since you're handicapped by your own handwriting, I'll start first, or we'll just talk about January in general. So let's set the table. It's January 1991, and there are 4 major release days, but I think there are actually more than that. But the ones that actually come to mind for me, and I'm just going to read off the list of things that were interesting to me, and I want to see how they line up with you.
Okay.
So the first thing is the first Meshuggah release, Contradictions Collapse.
Yes.
Now, I found this later. I did not find this in 91.
Same here.
Definitely not on my radar.
No.
But I have gone back and listened to this record. It's good. It's clearly not their best stuff, but it was still very important because that set the table for them to become the band that they are, which is just a mega metal band at this point.
Yeah, a lot of people don't think about the fact that, like, bands don't just pop out of the gate most of the time. There are exceptions, of course, but a lot of bands, when they really come strong and make that big splash, for a lot of bands, it's like second record, third record,
fifth record, depending on how far, how long along.
Like, not everybody's Lamb of God. Like, Lamb of God, New American Gospel, they came out the gate, and they were everywhere.
Yeah, but you have to remember that they cut their teeth as
Burn the Priest.
Burn the Priest.
Right.
So it's not like they hadn't already, it wasn't one of those situations where right out of the gate, they were just a brand new band and took off. They were the exact same band, and they just changed names.
Right.
So,
well, there's 2 other things before we continue that I should mention. One, we talked about it before, and here we go with the old guy shit again. This was in the days before YouTube, before social media, before, there wasn't even really much of an internet back then. So this was back when people had to search stuff out, like you mentioned.
Yeah, you had to look. You had
to go look for your own stuff, because there was plenty of stuff that I got where we used to look through the thank you lists and just buy other records based on the thank you lists.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, they're friends with these guys. I want to check this out. I don't even know what it sounds like, but I'm going to go buy it. Exactly. Now, you can jump on YouTube and listen to
1,000 bands
the whole record.
Minutes. You could listen to 1,000 bands in 10 minutes if you wanted to, because you just give them 10 seconds of your time and keep moving.
Right. The other thing
it's so
also,
much easier now.
And this kind of died out in the 80s, and as this is 91, it's just coming out of the 80s. It used to be, and I mentioned this with Meshuggah for a reason, and I'll get to it. It used to be that bands would put out a record every year.
Yeah, or every other year at least.
Or every other year. And that kind of died out because with Meshuggah, Contradictions Collapse came out in 91, but then Destroy, Erase, Improve, which was the next record, which 94. Is the one that blew them up, came out in 95.
Okay. I knew it was around the time I was in college, because that's when I discovered Meshuggah. Was like at my college radio station. I was like, oh shit, this band is fucking sick. And then I went backwards, but I found them later. So the next thing on my list is the specials, and they came out with the singles collection. So it's not really, it's more of like a greatest hits record.
Right.
But for me, this is new blood. I had never really dug into ska music before this record. So for me, it was something new on the till.
Right.
I know you're not really a ska guy, so it kind of goes by you. You probably wasn't even on your list. The next thing on my list is David Lee Roth, A Little Ain't Enough.
Right. Which
and that hits my 80s holdover.
Yeah. Good record.
Yeah, it's perfectly fine.
Not as good as his first couple.
Yeah, but it's not bad.
No, it's not bad. I was really hoping to see him on that tour, and I didn't. Mm-hmm. But there was, of course, the sad story with that record, which is Jason Becker playing guitar on that record and then being diagnosed with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease.
Right.
So he never got to do that tour. He recorded the record.
And then that was
it. And then that was it. And with ALS, sadly, the prognosis is not good, but here it is now 30 years later, and he's still living, still able to communicate using a special system, and he's still able to write music, which is wild.
That is pretty wild.
He developed a whole system. I think his father helped him do it using eye movements, because he basically has no use of
his limbs.
None. But he's able to use the eye movements, and he's able to use that with a computer system to communicate with people. Because there are videos of people going to visit him and him having conversations with them. And then,
that's sick.
Yeah. And then on top of that, they've also set up that system so that he's able to use his eye movements to write new music. And then he has it performed by different people. He's put out a couple of records like that, which is insane.
Hey, where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah. And it was sad that he got that chance with David Lee Roth and never got to
really run with it
or anything. But it's an inspiring story that here he is 30 years later, defying the odds, still alive, still creative.
Yeah, I mean, most people don't live that long.
No, definitely not. Most people, I don't remember the exact numbers, but they certainly don't live more than 5 years in most cases.
Yeah, it's just usually about 5 years.
Yeah. So for him to make it that far and be as functional as he is, and if you see him having these conversations with people, he's still got a sense of humor too, which is wild to me.
Yeah, because I definitely would be one bitter motherfucker.
Yeah.
I don't know that I would be able to keep the humor up.
And maybe that humor and that positivity is why he's still going, and that's awesome.
So something else released that exact same day, Gang Starr, Step in the Arena.
That is definitely on my list because that is a classic record.
Absolute murderer of a record. And if you haven't, I saw Gang Starr live, and anybody who didn't have that chance missed out.
I never got to see them.
I saw them with Rage Against the Machine.
Wow.
Who will be coming up on this list in a little bit. No surprise. So now we're going to get into the 29th of January, which is right down at the bare end of the month. And there are 5 records that came out at that time. That
hold on a second. I got one more January one for you.
Before that?
Just to get a kick out of it. Because
Okay.
some of these are influential, and some of them I'm throwing in just for the fucking lulz. The DiVinyls.
That's on my list. I'm about to hit them right now.
Oh, I thought you were going into February.
No, I said January 29th.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No problem. So, January 29th, 5 records came out that caught my attention for some reason or another. Number 1, DiVinyls. Number 2, Jesus Jones, Doubt.
Yep.
Number 3, Gerardo, Morrissette. And Susanna Hoffs, When You're a Boy.
Yes.
And Screaming Trees, Uncle Anesthesia. Now, the DiVinyls and Gerardo are on my embarrassing list. They are on my embarrassing list. So I was fresh in the high schoolish area at the time. And you listen to the radio and you hear these things and they become part of just the subtext of your life. It's just like right now, kids that are listening to the radio are going to go back and half of the songs that they're listening to are going to be embarrassing listens. It is what it is. So, I Touch Myself and Rico Suave were ubiquitous radio hits in the early 1991 year time frame. Even though I know just from doing some research earlier that the Gerardo song came out in December of 90, the record didn't come out until the end of January in 91. Now, Susanna Hoffs, if you don't know who Susanna Hoffs is, you need to go back and listen to the Bangles. She's the most important member of that band, and I've continued to follow her since then, up till now. She's got a wonderful voice. I don't care if you guys don't like it. This was normal course of business for me. While Screaming Trees and Jesus Jones fall into New Blood. But Jesus Jones fell off. I liked a couple songs on that record, but it is what it is. It's gone now. I still like the Screaming Trees. I think they're one of the better bands from Seattle to come out.
They're one of the few bands from Seattle that I was never into.
I found them just randomly because I
heard them. I don't hate them. They're just
So this is the time frame where I'm watching MTV's 120 Minutes, and this is a band that is 100% all over 120 minutes. So, you're hearing songs here and there, and you buy the record, and you listen to the record. I'm not going to tell you that I go out and listen to this record all the time, but if it comes up on random, I'm excited to listen to it. So, for me, that's my January. Did I miss anything that was influential to you on your list?
No. The only other thing that I made a note of, which I don't know if it's really your thing at all, was that DJ Quick's first album came out in January.
I saw that on there, but it really didn't make any difference to me one way or the other. I mean, I get that he's influential in general, but obviously it's not my thing.
Yeah, it's not nearly to the level of some of the other Compton stuff, but it's cool. See his debut in the mix there, and he was one of the first ones to really start doing the G-Funk thing.
Yep.
So in that sense, that kind of set the tone between the stuff that he did and the NWA stuff,
which is coming up later.
Yeah, the NWA and Compton's Most Wanted will also be mentioned later too. They really set the stage for that kind of G-Funk sound that you kept hearing later on with Snoop and a lot of the other Compton-related stuff.
So I'm going to say that the most important release from January of 91 is Gang Starr Step in the Arena.
I would agree with you.
So if you're going to go out and listen to anything that we've talked about so far, that's the record to start on if you haven't already listened to it. So February. What do you have for February? Because I have 5 things that I want to talk about in February, and a lot of it is clowning.
Well, that's more than me. I've only got 2 on my list.
Okay.
February 5th was Queen's Innuendo record, which was the last record with Freddie Mercury. We can get into it more later as we work our way down, but later in 91, Freddie Mercury passed. So he had recorded this as he was starting to get sick, and they put it out knowing that. But even with the release of this record, they kept his sickness
under wraps
until shortly before he passed.
Yeah, I mean, when he did his press conference, wasn't it like mere weeks before he passed?
I think it was within days, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
Yeah, I did see it. I didn't make a note of the exact date, but looking at it, and like I said, we'll get into it a little later on as we get into November, but I'm pretty sure they only announced his sickness just days before he passed.
Yeah.
And
we've talked about it before. Queen is a band that if you haven't spent time listening to them, you can never understand the amazingness of musicians that they actually are. Like, you may not like every single song, but they could literally do anything and make it sound good.
And by the way, he was diagnosed with AIDS in '87 and recorded these tracks in between March of '89 and November of '90, but they denied.
Well, they didn't even play really after.
No, they didn't play live, but they denied any media reports that came out. They denied that he was sick, and kept it quiet. But by the time he started recording this, he was already in bad shape.
Did you watch the Queen biopic? That's not necessarily exactly how it all went,
Yes.
but I thought it was a well done one.
Yeah, I thought it was really good.
It was fun to watch, even knowing that it wasn't like dead accurate to every single thing that happened.
Right.
Because you have to tell a story that's compelling in a movie sense. I thought it was great.
Here's a secret for you listeners. Real life is never as exciting as you want it to be. Yeah. So sometimes they did the same thing with Straight Outta Compton.
Yeah, you got to jazz it up.
It's like you got to jazz it up a little bit and add a little something, because sometimes life is pretty damn fucking boring.
So what was the other thing that you wanted to talk about in February?
The other February was February 14th, which is definitely not my thing.
It's definitely my thing.
Yeah. Boyz II Men.
Definitely my fucking thing. So in between that, there was an embarrassing listen that came out. And that embarrassing listen was on the exact same record company as Boyz II Men. And it's Another Bad Creation. And it's a bunch of little kids.
I almost wrote that down.
And, I mean, again, I'm 14, and these kids are probably like 10 or 11, so they're kind of my contemporaries at the time. And I definitely listened to the record, and there are 2 tracks on there that are memorable to me. Everything else is like a blur of just, this is terrible, and I knew it was terrible at the time. But looking back, I'm embarrassed that I even listened to this at all.
Cooling at the playground, you know?
Yeah, no, exactly. Exactly. And you knew it. So you must be embarrassed. You're even more embarrassed than I am, because you didn't write it down.
From the time I was in maybe grade school, but definitely by high school, I absorbed anything related to music. Mm-hmm. So I'm aware of all kinds of stupid shit that I probably shouldn't be aware of. And that's even before my record store days, so I can't even blame it on that. I just, listen, I was a kid reading Billboard magazine. Like, I was all about music by the time I was in high school, so I just was absorbing every little thing.
So, as a guy who absolutely loved New Edition, Boyz II Men was like the next step for listening to men that could actually sing. Now, whether you like Boyz II Men or you don't like Boyz II Men, I don't really give a shit. But you cannot deny that the group of those 4 could sing their ass off.
Yeah.
And that is the most important piece of this, like, of them coming out with this debut. Like, they can still pack a fairly large venue at this point. I'm not going to say they could sell like an arena, but they could sell out the Man in Philadelphia. You know, they could come to New York City and do Radio City, and they'll have a fucking full crowd 30 years later. And they don't even have all their original members, and they're still packing crowds wherever they want to go. The music, it just speaks for itself, because it's good music and it's well performed. Like it, don't like it, that's beside the point.
Right.
So, there are 2 more things that are on my list that you did not bring up. One of them is new blood for me, and it's Dinosaur Jr. I am a huge Dinosaur Jr. fan.
Okay.
Now, I get that people find Jay Mascis's voice annoying, and I probably did at one point too, but I've grown to love it. So they came out with Green Mind. It's not their debut record. I think it's their second release. But this is when I found out about them. Again, 120 minutes on MTV.
Right. Yeah, I was never really... My only exposure to them was when they played Lollapalooza.
Uh-huh.
And they were just so loud and noisy that I just wasn't into it. Like, it just sounded like a mess. So I was never down. And I'm sure I heard some other songs at different places. I just didn't do any. That style is not really my thing.
I totally get it. There are 3 songs on the record that I absolutely love, and one of them is called The Wagon, followed up by Puke and Cry, which are 1 and 2 on the front, and then I also like How'd You Pin That On Me. Those are the 3 songs that really stuck out to me on the record, but that's inside baseball.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about is cultural appropriation. Embarrassing listens.
This was almost on my list also.
YBT, Young Black Teenagers. Pop the bottle, twist cap. Yeah. This is, like, at the time, I was like, alright, I like that song. That song's cool. It's, like, listenable or whatever. It is a white kid in dreads, part of a group called Young Black Teenagers. He's not black.
Hold on. None of them were black.
None.
Not one. Because I saw them live once.
You did? I did not.
Believe it or not, and I think this was 92. I would have to look it up and be sure. Anthrax and Public Enemy toured together, and the openers were Primus, and Young Black Teenagers did like a 10-minute set.
Oh, God.
And nobody cared.
So, one of the problems that I have with this, though, is that Public Enemy supported them and were actually produced by the producer of Public Enemy.
Yeah, they were a Hank Shockley thing.
Yeah, and I'm like, now looking back at this, how? I don't, it doesn't, like, I can't make sense of any of this, being that not one fucking person in this whole thing.
They actually got a funny mention. I think I mentioned this to you before. There was an interview that I watched with Busta Rhymes. What's his name from CNN? Van Jones.
Okay.
He did a long interview with Buster, and Buster actually mentioned these guys because Buster used to go, like, all the leaders of the New School guys, another one that we'll get into later.
Yep.
They would go hang out at Shockley's studio, and he had a bunch of groups that were all in and out of there. And he was trying to get them deals and this and that. And he just had a bunch of names on the wall, like group names. And Buster and the other, Dinko and the leaders guys were like, what about Young Black Teenagers? That's perfect. And he was like, nah, I already got somebody else in mind for that. And it's like, you look at it, it's like, oh, okay, so that's what you're giving to the white kids? It's just silly. So but yeah, they literally had a 10-minute set on that Public Enemy tour. I didn't see them in New York. I actually saw them upstate, because I know they played the Ritz on that tour, but I saw them upstate in Troy, New York, at the RPI Fieldhouse, because I had a friend who went to school there.
So the only thing to note is that their DJ was DJ Scribble,
yes,
who is a well-known and well-loved figure when it comes to remixes. Like, he's done remixes for damn near everyone at this point. So, I'm not trying to clown on anyone specifically. It's just the name and the image don't match the fuck up, and it's just goddamn weird. And it hits my embarrassing listens.
Yeah, I really wonder if they caught flack for that.
I doubt they did at the time, but if you did that now, the flack would be so deep that you would never dig out of it. But the time frame leaves it so that, it just goes under the fucking radar at this point.
And by the way, their second record...
That's the one that had Tap the Bottle on it, but...
Yeah, that... their second record was done by Hank and Keith Shockley, Grandmaster Flash, and Terminator X all produced tracks on that record.
Which is ridiculous.
Insane.
And it actually charted. I think it charted at like 148 or 158 out of the top 200.
Well, Tap the Bottle was number 6 hot rap single. And they had a second one called Roll with the Flavor, which made number 22 hot rap singles.
Yeah, it's embarrassing. The whole thing is embarrassing.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy enough that Bomb Squad's involved, but like Terminator X and Grandmaster Flash, like,
right.
Holy
right,
shit.
No, that's what I'm saying. It don't make no damn sense. But hey, you got to make money. So I'm going to say that the most important release of February is definitely Young Black Teenagers. Is Boyz II Men. Like, it's the most... Because I would normally go with Queen. I would. But that record was not well-loved, as it doesn't have the depth of hits, whereas Boyz II Men really has the staying power of that month.
No, and I would agree, even though, I mean, I'm not an R&B guy, generally, especially the newer type. Like, this to me is what I call the newer R&B.
Okay.
As opposed to, say, Stevie Wonder. You know what I mean?
I would argue that this is closer to Stevie Wonder than where we're at now, but
certainly.
It is definitely the beginning of where we're at now.
But this stuff never really appealed to me, because I've talked before about hip-hop and how I didn't like stuff that was influenced, like this kind of merged with hip-hop.
Yep, that's like where it really kind of like started.
Yeah, I respect it. It's just not my thing, but you can't deny that Boyz II Men record really set the stage for that whole genre, really.
Yeah, without
because there wasn't stuff like that happening, especially doing like the more a cappella type shit.
So I'm gonna say I didn't put it on my list, but later on there should be an entry for Jodeci. I would say that Jodeci, Boyz II Men, and a few other key players right around 90, 91, 92 really set the stage for where we're at right now when it comes to merging hip-hop and R&B.
Yeah.
But you have to tie it, especially with Boyz II Men, straight back to New Edition, who took doo-wop and turned it into their own thing, which now they turned Boyz II Men into like the second coming of what they were doing.
I will say this too, as an outsider who was never really that into the stuff. Boyz II Men, what stood out with them was that they were kind of clean. Like Jodeci and New Edition were kind of on some get pussy shit.
Yes,
you know what I mean.
100%.
Sort of like how Big Daddy Kane and LL Cool J started to get in that direction too.
Yep.
But like Boyz II Men was not like that.
Like they had the song "I'll Make Love to You," whatever, like you want me to, yada yada yada. But it was not dirty.
Right. And their image in general.
Jodeci a little dirty.
Yeah. New Edition a little bit, but Jodeci definitely
super dirty.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm here for it. I'm here for all of it. Do your thing. I don't care.
Yeah, I mean, once again, I'm not hating it on it. I'm not being critical of it. It's not my thing anyway, but I don't have a problem with it. So everybody's got their own approach. But Boyz II Men definitely had more of a clean image, which probably helped them.
Absolutely. So now March. We're getting to the end of the first quarter of 1991.
Yep.
How many records do you have on this list?
Well, I only had one, but then I realized looking now that I missed one, and I actually missed two. So
I have 9 records that I wanted to
really
point out. Now, I'm not saying I loved these records, but they had an impact on me mentally. And you got to remember, I was 3 or 4 years behind you in time frames. So things are hitting me different than they're hitting you. You already have experience, and I'm not.
Actually, I spaced out because I see a few here that I missed for March.
So, first thing, KOF, The White Room. I am not a dance music guy, but I fucking love the KLF. It's not even an embarrassing listen for me. It is normal course of business. Yeah. I love this. I still love this record, The White Room. And I posted it on Brendan Shull's fucking page the other day because we were trying to like go back and forth with like quote unquote embarrassing things. I was like, I'm not embarrassed. The KLF is going to rock me. So, you know, I love that. Now, embarrassing listen, number 1 in March, The Escape Club, Dollars and Sex. They had some like horrible fucking song that at the time I was like, yo, this song's pretty fucking cool. And now I look at that song and I go, oh God, what was I even fucking thinking? This is terrible. And I think, what is the name of this fucking song? I can't remember I think it's called I'll Be There. And it's really, really exceptionally bad. So
I got nothing because this doesn't even show up on my radar. Yeah, I don't recall ever even hearing of it.
Well, it falls in the embarrassing listens for me. Like, I'm embarrassed that I ever listened to this song. Now, soundtrack for New Jack City.
Yep.
Undeniable soundtrack. I don't want to get into everybody that's on it, but it had some fucking serious heat. But
I mean,
that's normal business for me because as I said, I'm listening to hip hop more than I'm listening to almost anything else at that point. Now,
but that's also a perfect example because if you look at the names on the soundtrack, it's a mix of that R&B and hip hop, exactly like I was talking about.
Right, it's like where it all kind of falls together. But I'm talking the Ice-T song, the actual song,
Untouchable.
New Jack Hustler. You know,
Untouchable.
Like, amazing song. But then you got Color Me Bad on here with I Want to Sex You Up, and it's like, I want to kill myself.
But this is where that whole thing of New Jack Swing started.
Like, fall together.
And then that kind of influenced the movie, which in turn brought it out to the masses even more.
Yep.
So the two things kind of fed off of each other, and this became a really big point. And just like we were talking about before with New Edition and stuff like that, you got Johnny Gill on here, you got Keith Sweat.
But I don't mind Johnny Gill and I don't mind Keith Sweat. Like, Johnny Gill is part of New Edition. Like, right. At this point, I'm already like on board with generally him. So, anyway.
But then you also had Two Live Crew.
Yes, which love them, and they're on a separate list that I want to talk about later on in the show. Okay. So, another embarrassing listen. Amy Grant, Heart in Motion. This record is absolutely deplorable. It is Christian rock, and I didn't even know it was Christian rock, but I'm 13, 14, 15 years old, and all the girls around me are listening to it. So it's in my radar. And at 14, and you're trying to get the fucking attention of girls, you listen to stuff they're listening to.
Right.
Just so you know, and man, this is some bullshit music. Fuck Amy Grant. No way. This is terrible. It's embarrassing listens.
Now, if I remember right, this was when she was trying to kind of go stealth with the Christian stuff.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. But it's still Christian.
Yeah. But she wasn't trying to beat people over the head with it anymore and was trying to get more mainstream. And I guess it worked because this was when she started showing up on people's radar.
It showed up on everything. Everybody knew who she was.
Actually, yeah, because I'm looking at it. She had a #1 on the Billboard Hot 100.
Yeah, granted, she has a great voice. It's not about her voice or anything. It's just, it makes me feel gross knowing that I fucking listen to that.
I mean, this is another one of those things, like, this would never even, like, this is not at all something that I would ever listen to.
Well, I would never listen to it now, but back then when I was 14 and I didn't know any better, right. I did. And I'll admit anything because everything's a goddamn story. You know, the reason why I was checking this out was because all the girls around me were checking it out. But now, what the fuck was I thinking?
For me also, at this point in time, if it wasn't like thrash metal or gangster rap, I wasn't all that interested, or hair metal.
Right. So when we get,
if it wasn't one of those directions, like I just couldn't be bothered with a few exceptions, but generally that's where my head was at.
So New Blood for me is actually Morrissey, because while I should have known who he was, I didn't know the Smiths until around this time. So Morrissey Kill Uncle falls into the New Blood regime. It kills me that I really enjoy Morrissey's voice and typically his songs from the 80s and the 90s juxtaposed against the piece of shit that he is right now. So, I don't want to talk about him any more than that. Now, the next thing that's important is Normal Course of Business, but BDP Live Hardcore Worldwide. I love that record, but it is a compilation of old songs.
That's why I didn't even put it on my list, because it was just really it's a live album with a couple of new tracks, and it's like it's weird because what hip hop artist put out a live record?
Not that many, but I did enjoy this one, so I put it on the list. It's just Normal Course of Business, nothing really to write home about. Now, let's crank up the hate machine. REM, Out of Time. Fuck that band. I cannot stand this band. There was only one other band that I hate more from this time period, and it's U2. So U2 and REM, both of them kiss my whole entire ass.
Never gave a shit about REM. And then Michael Stipe came into Tower Records years ago and was a complete fucking asshole. So fuck you. And fuck you again. And I don't care about REM one bit.
So I want to round out March with
Mr. Big?
Yeah, that's an 80s holdover for me. Like, I didn't necessarily know who they were in the 80s, but they had the 80s sound. They had the 80s feel. That is an 80s holdover. I'm still listening to stuff that ticks that hair metal thing for me.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed it at the time. I don't think that I could really listen to it now, per se.
This was their second record.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked their first record a lot. There were some songs on this record that I liked, but I definitely didn't enjoy it as much. And then they had the ballad.
That song, the ballad, the To Be With You ballad, was what put them on my radar because, again, all the girls were listening to this shit. I'm listening to this shit. And then I hear the rest of it. I'm like, it's not bad. The record's not bad.
See, I came at them from a different direction because you had a couple of hotshot players. Because I was a fan of Paul Gilbert from when he was doing Racer X. Because, you know me, I'm into all that stupid guitar shred shit. All that shrapnel shit. So I knew about him from Racer X. And Billy Sheehan, from David Lee Roth and, all the other shit that he did, like Talus and stuff like that. But with this, like, there were a couple of okay songs, but I didn't enjoy it as much. And then you had the ballad, and that shit was so worn out. It was everywhere.
Everywhere.
Oh my god.
So things that I skipped that came out that people would be like, yo, you didn't talk about this. No Effects, ribbed. I don't care about No Effects, and I never will.
I've got a couple more also. No Effects I never cared about either. It never did anything for me.
Let me guess, Metal Church.
Metal Church is one. The Human Factor was a good record. I was a fan of Metal Church from their first record, and they switched singers. There were some good songs on this record, and there were definitely one or two songs on this record that got a lot of time on Headbangers Ball.
Okay.
So I'm pretty sure the Human Factor, the title track, got played on Headbangers Ball a bunch, and I got into it from there. The other record that I was going to mention, which is a weird one, and I listened to recently, and it doesn't hold up like it used to, was Mindfunk.
Not a fan, so I skipped right past it, like it didn't exist on this list.
I liked it back then. I liked they put out a couple of records, and I only really listened to the first two, and I liked it. But then this is another one that I think I discovered off of Headbangers Ball, but I went back to it recently because it came up randomly when I just had shuffle going on my music, and it didn't grab me the same way it did before. They were weird because they were kind of this super group.
Right.
Because Pat, the singer, actually was a singer for Uniform Choice, which was a straight edge hardcore band. Louis Svetic, the guitar player, was in a band called E-Trope, and he had played, he ended up playing in Ministry later on.
And he was also in MOD.
Yeah, he was in MOD also. And I think John Monty, the bass player, was in MOD also. And the drummer was Reed St. Mark, who was in Celtic Frost. So it was kind of this crazy supergroup thing happening. But it sounded absolutely nothing like
any of the other bands.
Any of the stuff that they were doing. Like, you got the singer for a straight edge hardcore band, and two dudes from MOD and the drummer from Celtic Frost doing like almost funk metal.
Yeah, just weird. It didn't talk to me at all at the time, and it still doesn't.
Yeah,
so that's why I skipped right past it.
I enjoyed it back then, but on a recent listen,
So I noticed that I missed one thing on this list that I would have pointed out as an embarrassing listen as I'm re-looking at it. Yoyo, Make Way for the Motherlode. This is a prodigy from Ice Cube. And holy shit, is this embarrassing. It's fucking terrible.
I purposely left that one off.
So, yeah, embarrassing. Enough. Let's move on. So, I don't even know if I can pull together a favorite or a most important, because I don't want to give it to Morrissey. So I'm going to have to say that it's the New Jack City soundtrack.
Yeah, I would probably go in that direction too. None of them really grabbed me. And by the way, I see it and I skipped it on purpose, but there was a Bullet Boys record in there also that was just trash.
Yeah, not a fan. Not a fan of them, but I'm really not a fan of that record.
I like the first Bullet Boys record. Got to see them live, but this second record was no. Pass.
So now we're into the second quarter of 1991.
April, and this is where things really start to heat up a bit.
So I found this band later, and the reason I found this band is because the singer of this band is on two of my favorite podcasts to listen to right now.
Okay. Eugene
S. Robinson of the Eugene S. Robinson Show, right. And as well, if I did it, the podcast that I occasionally point you to.
Yeah.
He is the singer of Oxbow. Oh. And April 1st, they released King of the Jews. So, I have gone back and listened to this. It's not necessarily my thing, but the reason I found it is because 30 years later, the singer of this band is still doing something that would put them on my radar. Next up, I know this is on your fucking list. I know this is on your list.
For sure.
This better be on everybody's list. And I can already tell you right now that there is a fight for me personally in who should be the most important record of April 91, but this is going to win. Sepultura Rise. Yo, how fucking sick is this record?
On fire.
To this day, this record could get me to flip a table. They're on this, like, if the four of them that made this record got together and agreed to put all the bullshit behind and play this record front to back along with or this record and Beneath the Remains, like a little Beneath the Rise thing, I'm going to jail. I'm telling you right now.
Can I tell you something?
What?
As much as I hate to say this, I believe it after seeing them both perform live. I don't think they could play this record anymore. Like that's how wild this record is.
Yeah, well, it's so fast.
Because this shit is so fast and so insane that, like, we were talking about feeling old and can't get in the pit no more. Like, if I were Igor, I would not want to play this record.
He's like, nah, I'm good.
I would have to have a massage therapist on tour with me every day and a whole case of energy drinks.
Yo,
and an 8-ball.
They were playing this night after night. Night after night for years.
Oh, I saw them a couple of times touring for this record. I saw them open for Ministry.
Okay.
It was Ministry, Helmet, and Sepultura in a place with seats. Because get this, it was supposed to happen in Madison Square Garden.
Okay.
And I had floor tickets because the Garden started doing things around this time where the front sections of the floor were just open pit, which was a feel for a show like that.
Oh,
fuck yeah.
Yeah.
So I bought the tickets, but then I guess it didn't sell well, so they moved it to the Paramount Theater, which is all seats.
Upstairs. Yeah, that's upstairs.
It's downstairs.
Downstairs, whatever.
Yeah. But all seats, whack.
Yeah.
But it was so wild and so loud. Like during Helmet, I think the sound system actually like
clipped
for a second. There was like a split second of silence.
Yeah,
which is wild. Like if you can brown out a sound system like that for a second, like, oh man. But just seeing Sepultura on that tour, oh my god!
I guarantee you they had to have been on fire too.
Oh my god, they were insane. But even then, like just the progression, because I had Beneath the Remains, I still have it on vinyl.
Okay.
But the progression from Beneath the Remains to Arise,
it's insane. Yo, just the songwriting alone, but also the speed. But what's most important is when they hit the breaks for the breakdowns, the breakdowns are so crushing because the speed around it is so blistering.
Well, here's the other thing, too. You know from playing live, what do you do most of the time when you play songs live?
You play them faster.
And they do.
Oh, God.
Because even recently, like, I fell in a YouTube hole and saw some footage from back then.
Right.
And I was just like, what the fuck? How are they even able to do this?
It's just so fast.
Just the guitars, the drums, everything is just so fast. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's unbelievable that they could pull that off even back then. Now,
I don't want to spend too much time on this record because we could spend a whole 30 hours on this record. I don't want to spend too much time, but let's just say this record is one of the most important records that came out in all of 1991, at least for me.
Yeah, like I said, those dudes are pushing 50 because they've got to be around my age.
I think they're in the 50s.
Max is 51,
and Igor's probably 49.
Igor is 50.
50, okay.
So, dude, if I'm 50 and you want me to play that shit on drums, I'm telling you to fuck right off. Get Eloy to do it instead.
Eloy Casagrande. Yo, that dude can play some goddamn drums.
That dude is a fucking animal. Not only can he play some drums, but that dude hits like he's trying to go through the drum.
Yeah, I mean he's wearing skins out every night. There's no way.
And he's been playing. If you look on, I don't know if I ever sent this to you, but if you look on YouTube,
I've seen him.
Yeah, when he was like 14.
Yep.
It's like, holy shit, man.
So,
but anyway,
back to the list.
Back to the list because there's a couple of other records that came out that same day.
Yeah, I know. I'm about to get to two of them, which
crazy.
I think you're gonna have. But so, Arise came out on April 2nd, 91.
Yeah.
Lenny Kravitz, Mama Said, came out on April 2nd, 91. White Lion, Main Attraction, came out on April 2nd, 1991. Now, White Lion is an '80s holdover band for me. I loved them back then, and I don't have a problem with them technically because they're just doing their damn thing.
Right.
And I actually hated Lenny Kravitz when he first started. I hated him. But over time, I've grown to not love it, but appreciate it. Like, I can listen to it. It doesn't cause me the pain that it originally caused me. And I was never really into that, like, 60s free love thing that he was kind of pushing.
Yeah. It was never really my thing either.
But I can appreciate that he's a really good musician and frontman, etc.
No, it had some good songs.
Yeah, it's fine.
And honestly, looking at it as far as influential, a lot of these songs are still recognizable now. Like, you hear these songs, you'll know these songs.
Yep.
Because they use them all over the place. Like, Always on the Run, and It Ain't Over Till It's Over. Like,
yep, It Ain't Over.
Those songs were huge, and 30 years later, people are still hearing those songs, still knowing those songs. White Lion, as much as I like a lot of hair metal stuff, White Lion never did anything for me.
No, not at all.
No, and it's funny, and it was unrelated to this, but once again, past couple of days, YouTube suggested some White Lion thing to me, and I was like, oh, let me try it, and still just, nah.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you that it's not my favorite thing in the world, but I listened to the record a number of times back then because they were a holdover band from things I was listening to in the 80s. And there's not much else I can say about it. Like, it's not high on the list, it's just an 80s holdover that had a following at the time.
Yeah, I do remember this record because I had a girlfriend at the time that was really into them.
Okay.
So I heard a lot of this record and like their other records. They're one of those bands that just never did much for me. As much as I like a lot of hair metal stuff, that one was just like, it's all right.
Mike and the Mechanics also dropped a record that day, but other than the first Mike and the Mechanics thing, I don't really give a crap about them at all. So then, April 6th, alum from You Can't Do That on Television drops her debut record, Alanis Morissette.
Yeah.
And you know what? I hate this record now, but at the time, I fucking loved this record. But as I gotten older and listened to more and more stuff, and she put out further and further records, I realized this bitch can't sing at all. Like,
I mean, bad. She can
yodel, and she can come up with dumb shit. But you know what? She's a terrible artist. I do not support any of this. But needed to be noted that she dropped the record. Now,
and for those of you who don't know, like, this was not the Alanis Morissette that you know. This was like some bullshit.
The beginning.
Teeny bopper pop.
Yeah, it's bad.
Debbie Gibson shit.
It's really bad. So, but the more important release of this month that isn't Arise, Temple of the Dog. Temple of the Dog.
Yeah. I mean, we could certainly do hours about this record, because to me, this record is ground zero for the entire grunge movement.
Without this record coming out and all the events surrounding the reason this album even exists, there is no full-on grunge movement.
For those that don't know, the Temple of the Dog record was a tribute to a gentleman by the name of Andrew Wood. He was a singer of a band called Mother Love Bone, and they had a record called Apple that came out in 1990.
And the hit song on it was Star Dog Champion.
Yeah. The week before that record came out, or a couple of weeks before the record was scheduled to be released, they ended up delaying it for a bit. Andrew Wood died of a drug overdose. Now, Andrew Wood was kind of the centerpiece. This was a tribute record for him, but he had been roommates with Chris Cornell from Soundgarden. and guys in Mother Love Bone were involved in this record, and a couple of those guys ended up going on to form Pearl Jam. So that's why I say this is the centerpiece. This is ground zero for the whole grunge movement, because you've really got
a large portion of the major players involved.
Well, they had an unknown guy named Eddie Vedder
come sing
that they had met, that they got to come sing on the record, and that was the genesis of Pearl Jam. You had Chris Cornell singing lead, and you had Matt Cameron playing drums. Those two guys were from Soundgarden. Matt Cameron actually plays drums for Pearl Jam now. And you had Stone Gossard and Jeff Ament from Mother Love Bone, guitar player, bass player, who went on with Eddie Vedder to form Pearl Jam. And all of that all centered around the passing of Andrew Wood and the making of this record.
Also falls into the territory of Alice in Chains, as the song Wood is actually about Andrew Wood.
Right.
But we could get off on this tangent for hours. Let's have that.
There's all these connections, and I think we talked about it a little bit on the episode with Matt, because Chris Cornell's wife managed Alice in Chains, still manages Alice in Chains. So it was this whole just collective of these Seattle guys, and they were already friends. They were already friends, and then because Andrew died, they made this record, and Soundgarden had already been signed, because if I remember right, the Soundgarden was signed to A&M Records, and they're the ones that put out this record.
And Soundgarden comes up in a little bit. Yeah. We're going to get to them in a little bit.
Yeah, so this is really ground zero for that movement, because you had Soundgarden, who was already in the mix. You had Temple of the Dog, which morphed into Pearl Jam. And as you'll see as we go further down the line through the rest of 91, this was really ground zero for that whole movement, and grunge being as big as it became.
So the last thing I would want to point out is that Fishbone, The Reality of My Surroundings, came out that year. Now, I'm not the hugest Fishbone fan, but I really do enjoy this record.
It is a really good record. I like a lot of Fishbone stuff, which is funny because I always talk about not liking ska, but...
Well, yeah, but they're more than a ska band.
They're more
than a ska band. So you can't just label them a ska band. They do have some ska flavoring, but they're just a solid fucking band.
Yeah. So there are some good songs on this Fishbone record for sure.
So in the Arm Wrestling Championship of April, is it Sepultura or is it Temple of the Dog? I think it's Sepultura.
It's really tough because, like I said, Temple of the Dog set the stage for so many things that happened musically since then, but at the same time, Sepultura did too, and in a completely different direction.
So a totally different direction. And I mean that record still 30 years later makes me want to fucking throw chairs.
By the way, funny little trivia note. This is the record that Dave Grohl listens to before he goes on stage to get himself hyped up.
Really?
Yep.
Okay. So
I've heard him say many times in interviews that he always pumps himself up listening to Sepultura before jumping on.
All right. Well, then that seals it. Arise is the most important record of April.
It's
with a secondary. I'll give them an orange. Like if we had a runner-up, they got the runner-up.
It's so tough for me to choose one because, like I said, they're both in totally different directions, are monstrously influential to the next 30 years and beyond.
What I'm going to say is that now we're reaching the end of like my school year of whatever 91 was. I guess that's my freshman year in high school. So, I've been taking in all this music. I've been staring at MTV because I've been grounded. Because guaranteed, I'll tell you right now, I was grounded from November till June because I did not do well on grades, and my parents were just like, yo, until I got to, like, I think junior year, they would just ground me thinking that it was going to work, and my grades progressively got worse throughout the semesters. It just is what it is. I'm not doing homework. I never did homework. I'm not doing the reading. Anyway, so I'm just listening to music. If the classes were on music, I would have passed them with flying colors. I would have gotten straight A's. Now, May, Morbid Angel, Blessed Are the Sick. I found this record later. I didn't find this record in 91. I wasn't prepared for Morbid Angel. While I may have been introduced to Sepultura, Morbid Angel was like a step beyond.
Yeah.
So I found this probably 4 or 5 years later, but it's still a pretty damn good record.
I've never been a Morbid Angel fan.
Okay.
They had a few riffs here and there. And I remember this record because I got this when I was at college radio.
And you didn't love it then? You didn't love it then?
I didn't love it, but it was definitely... You know, I give them credit because they're one of those bands that really push the envelope for this type of shit.
Absolutely.
It just never grabbed me. Like, them and Deicide, like, that's two bands that, like, everybody raves about and just never did anything for me. I would rather listen to Malevolent Creation. See,
I prefer certain Deicide songs, but not Deicide as a whole. And if I'm talking about Morbid Angel, I'm mostly interested in Domination. That's the record where I feel like everything came together for them. But that is also the time frame in which I was introduced to Morbid Angel, and then I've since gone back and listened to the rest of their catalog up through Gateways of Annihilation. But that's beside the point here.
Yeah. Well, by the way, since I just happened to look it up because I just mentioned it, didn't show up on any of those lists that we were looking up, but April 8th of 1991, The 10 Commandments by Malevolent Creation was released, which was a great fucking record.
My problem with Malevolent Creation is they're a bunch of racists, so I don't fuck with them.
Yeah, you know what? Now that you mention that, I'm reminded of that. I had forgotten about that whole...
Yeah. So, I've actually seen them live.
One word.
Yeah.
Florida.
Yeah, Florida. But, I mean, Morbid Angels, Florida. Deicide, Florida. I mean, you can just keep going.
Cannibal.
Florida. Obituary, Florida. Yeah. But I do really love Obituary. I don't even give a shit.
Yeah. I mean, I'm certainly not saying everybody in Florida is a racist.
Oh, no. But it's not surprising when you find out someone is. And they're from Florida. You're like, oh, yeah, I expected it. So, 91 is probably the last time that I really gave a shit about anything that Huey Lewis and the News put out. But I really enjoyed some pieces of Hard at Play. It was actually a pretty good record. I've seen Huey Lewis and the News in person live. Like, I actually feel bad that he's got that ear thing going on and that he can't sing anymore.
Yeah.
Because I would willfully go pay and see them again before it was too damn late if it was an option. But it's not. I mean, that falls into, like, normal course of business. I already know who knew who Huey Lewis and the News was.
Right.
Now, a record that probably most people would fall into their territory of, nah, I don't think so, because it's not as good as the one before. De La Soul is Dead. I love that fucking record.
No, another group that
just never hit you hard.
You'll be surprised that, well, because at the time I was listening to gangster rap shit.
Right, and that's
give me NWA, give me Ghetto Boys. Like, I can't fuck with these fucking hippies.
Yeah, I enjoy the De La Soul. I really do.
And years later, I've come to appreciate it a little more, but it just never. It doesn't grab me the same way as a lot of the other shit.
Understandable. I can't fault you. Now, another thing that happened is that on May 14th, a number of things came out that were interesting to me.
Oh, yeah.
Ned's Atomic Dustbin, Godfather.
Yes.
Elvis Costello, Mighty Like a Rose, Ice-T, OG Original Gangster,
Classic.
Primus, Sailing the Seas of Cheese,
Classic.
and EMF, Schubert Dip. Now, it is important for me to say that Elvis Costello was new blood for me, and Primus is definitely on the hate machine. And EMF is an embarrassing listen. But I listened to all of this at the time. Now, I would assume that you are not an Elvis Costello fan.
No.
I have my ups and downs with this motherfucker, but I do really like Mighty Like a Rose. It is what it is. Now, Ned's Atomic Discipline, that's a fun record.
I actually like that record.
I mean, it's just alternative rock. Like,
saw them live once.
Okay.
I mean, the first thing that drew me was the bass player gimmick, because they have two bass players.
Bass players, yeah.
And that's another one that I think I got exposed to from MTV, actually.
That's how I got exposed.
Yeah, I think I got exposed to it by MTV, and then it came across my desk at college radio, and I was like, oh, cool.
So the song that really caught me off that record was Gray Cell Green.
Yep.
They had a video for it, and, you know. Oh, if going back and listening to it now, I'm like, I don't give a shit at all. But at the time, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't listened to it in a long time, but I wouldn't be my favorite thing, but I certainly wouldn't shit on it. I don't think it would. I don't think I'd have negative feelings about it.
So
EMF,
it's bad, but they sampled fucking
Dice.
So I was all on. I was a huge Dice fan. They sampled Dice. It's unbelievable. So I had to. I listened to the song. Like, it's stuck in my head. Like, if you say it's unbelievable, I'm most likely going to hear EMF in my mind. But it is an embarrassing listen, because it's terrible. It's terrible. But May 28th, two records that still get persistent play for me came out. Do you know which ones they are?
Well, that's a busy day. A lot of stuff came out, and one of them still gets regular play for me, and I wonder if that even overlaps with yours.
I'm pretty sure it does. I have two.
Because if you look at it, it's pretty obvious which one it is for me.
So NWA dropped their record that day. Yes, you read it backwards.
Read it. Well, that's the way it was printed.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say it the other way.
And then for me, Smashing Pumpkins Gish.
I thought you were going to say Jodeci.
No, I mean, I like Jodeci and it's fine, but they didn't even make my list. Like, I just deleted them right off the list. I didn't include Stevie Wonder because it's a soundtrack, but I love Smashing Pumpkins Gish. They're a new band. I mean, it's their debut record, but obviously it was a new thing for me to hear at the time. And right. I grew into being one of the biggest Smashing Pumpkins fans up until the double record came out. After the double record, I've been basically off the...
Melancholy you're talking about?
Yeah, after Melancholy, I haven't really been into them, but I saw them 10 times between 91 and 99. And they were playing big venues. I was spending big money to see this band.
Yeah. I wasn't a big fan of Gish. I was aware of it because I remember, I think I Am One was the video, right?
Yep.
Because I remember hearing that song, and I remember hearing Rhinoceros.
And Siva is insanely good. But I also...
To me, I was aware of them, but then Siamese Dream
was...
got into them. And to me, Siamese Dream is that record that they're never going to match it.
They're a band, in my opinion, that they should have stopped at Siamese Dream.
Yeah.
Now, I do think that there is one solidly really good record in Melancholy if you rip out all the bullshit.
That's what I was going to say, that would have been a good single record instead of a double. They should have just cut that shit down.
But it's Billy Corgan, and his head is so fucking big that he just felt like he could do whatever they wanted to do, and they indulged themselves and the record company's money and time and effort and put out something that still did really well for them. Like, it did. But if they had trimmed the fat, the follow-up to the record of Siamese Dream, as the follow-up, it could have taken them, like, interplanetary.
Yeah, it would have been much more on target.
So much just bullshit in there that it's hard to get through the whole thing.
Yeah.
So that's where I stopped with them, but I did start with Gish, and I really do enjoy this record.
Did I ever tell you that I met him?
You did? I feel bad for you.
Well, no, he was cool.
Was he cool?
He came in a tower once, and you can't miss him because the dude's like 6.5 feet tall. Oddly enough, I didn't even talk music with him. I had a short conversation with him about wrestling because I had heard that he was a wrestling fan.
Yeah, I mean, I know he's still a wrestling fan.
Yeah, well, he owns the NWA now.
Right.
He actually bought the rights for the NWA, but I had heard back then that he was a big wrestling fan, so he happened to be shopping, and I ended up helping him find some stuff, and then I think we talked about Ric Flair for like a minute or two.
Yeah. I'm going on record on the fucking show right now. Replay it if you need to. 5-10 years from now, if it needs to be. When Ric Flair goes, I'm taking a week off. I'm not going to be able to handle it. I'm right now. I'm going to be just crushed.
I'm with you. Greatest of all time.
Yeah, it's not even fucking close.
And I will say, based on the conversation that I had with Corgan, sounded like he would be in agreement also.
I mean, I don't follow very many wrestlers on the internet. I follow him, I follow Ric Flair, and I follow The Rock. But Rock is not really a wrestler. He's just a personality at this point, but he was a wrestler, I guess. And maybe one other wrestler total. But it's because Ric Flair is just such an important piece of my life from being a kid and just loving to follow the most hated but most charismatic person that I could find on television. Like,
yep. Totally
the heel, but also super fucking lovable.
Yeah.
At the same fucking time. Like, you just, if you don't like Ric Flair, you don't like wrestling. That's really what it comes down to.
No, and people say the same thing about Hogan, but you know what? Fuck you.
Fuck Hogan.
Fuck you, him. And fuck Hogan too.
Yeah, 100%.
Make me bust out my fuck Hulk Hogan t-shirt.
So for me, I'm going to say that NWA is the most important record of May.
Absolutely, without a doubt, because just...
It set the tone.
First of all, the skits on it are hysterical,
amazing. But it set the tone for everything else to come out in its wake.
Between Appetite for Destruction, Find 'Em, Fuck 'Em, and Flee, and She Swallowed It. That right there alone, that's a record maker.
100%.
Untouchable, and always into something.
Oh yeah, definitely. So,
but that whole thing with skits, everything, and the fact that they re-released it with 100 Miles and Running as the bonus is like, just, you get that re-release with those extra tracks from 100 Miles and Running, and like, that shit is just hot fire. Melt your fucking CD player.
So, NWA, number one most important record of May.
No question.
So in June, I'm just going to blast through this whole list because I find that...
By the way, since I missed something here...
anything?
No, I missed something, and this is a personal thing. May 3rd of 1991 was my first hardcore show.
Okay, what show was it?
And it was called the Last Thrash Bash. It was one of the few times that they said that L'Amour's was closing. They reopened and then eventually actually closed. But it was White Zombie opened the show.
I think we've talked about this show.
Typo Negative, who we're about to talk about. Biohazard Non-Fiction, not the rap group, but a metal band called Non-Fiction, with guys that were in a band called Hades. Leeway and the Cro-Mags, it was the first time that John Joseph and Harley reunited. And it was just
a wild show.
It was a bloodbath. Well, I had never been to a hardcore show, period. So here you are with like a lot of skins.
Yep.
A lot of crazy shit going on. And it was at L'Amour's where like
you could murder somebody and it didn't matter.
Yeah, well, you could murder somebody and the bouncers at L'Amour's would hide the body. And I'm not even kidding, because one of the first experiences that I had was watching a dude with long hair get smacked up and then dragged to the bathroom, and him getting smacked around the bathroom while the bouncers stood in front of the door to keep anybody from going in. And then the bouncers carried the dude outside, unconscious.
Probably just dropped him on the corner. Boom, done. Out of here.
Welcome to hardcore. That was my introduction to hardcore.
You're like, well, what the fuck did I get into?
Like, the music I was already into, but I had never been to a hardcore show. Mm. And all of a sudden I'm seeing that shit, having only gone to arena shows. Like, oh boy.
We're not in Kansas anymore.
Yeah, no shit. So how many do you have on your list?
For June?
Are we in June?
Yeah, we're in June now.
Yes. I have a couple.
6 or 7 or so. I can't really count. So, first thing is Skid Row, Slave to the Grind.
Yes. Which
is an 80s holdover. It's a good record.
Solid record, especially for a second record. Because a lot of times you get what they call the sophomore slump, where the second record is not nearly as good as the first.
I got to tell you, I hated this record at first.
Really?
Yeah, at first. But over the years, I've really softened my position on this record. And it's just that I was expecting exactly what I wanted from the first record on this record, and you don't necessarily get that.
Well, I was going to say, this record starts out heavy.
And I just, it wasn't what I was expecting from Skid Row. So, but it's a pretty good record. It's worth the listen if you like somebody can actually fucking sing. And decent musicianship.
Yeah, it starts out with, like, okay, you got Monkey Business, but then Slave to the Grind is a pretty heavy song, and it definitely, people thought of them as a hair metal band.
Yeah, they're not a fucking, I mean, they are a hair metal band, but not in the standard hair metal thing.
Well, that, and a lot of people from the first record thought, they were thinking of the ballads and shit.
Right.
And all of a sudden, Slave to the Grind is like some heavy drop D shit, and they're like, whoa.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but off the first record, Youth Gone Wild is my song.
No, there were some good songs. I saw them on tour for that first record. I saw them open for Aerosmith.
Okay.
And they put on a hell of a show.
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoy the first record, and over time, I've enjoyed the second record. Now, Typo Negative dropped Slow, Deep, and Hard.
Right.
I'm still not actually a Typo Negative fan. I never have been, but I did find this much later. I didn't find out about Typo Negative probably until 96, 97.
This is the only record. This is the only record of theirs that I really enjoyed.
Okay.
The other stuff was, because after this was Bloody Kisses, and that was when they started to blow up, and they figured out that going goth would make them money.
Right. So is this more of their like closer to hardcore record? I've never listened to it, so I don't know.
It's hard to explain. I can't even call it a hardcore record, but it doesn't have the goth influence like the later stuff does.
Okay.
And I would say it's much more angry, which is why I enjoy it. because songs are about, like, you know, I caught you cheating and I'm going to kill you. So it was a lot more enjoyable to me. And like I said, they played my first hardcore show, and it was a month before this record came out. And I had known Pete from Carnivore, and I love Carnivore, but I heard this shit, and I didn't know what to expect, and I was just like, whoa, this is wild. Because it was very different from Carnivore. But, I mean, the first song on the record, the chorus is, I know you're fucking someone else.
Okay.
So, like, okay. And then the next song, the chorus is like, you're a waste of life. So it was just a lot of wild shit. But it was definitely, like I said, not that God influenced stuff that they got into later on. Because they put out Bloody Kisses, and then, you know, Black Number One brought in that money and that fame, and suddenly they're getting offered, you know, opening for Motley Crue and shit. Which, hey, good for them, but they lost me by that point. Like, I was only really a fan of that first record.
Okay. Now, Big Audio Dynamite 2. I am not necessarily a fan of this band, but that they had one specific song that made me buy this record, and I hate the record, and I subsequently hate this fucking song at the same time, too. And, you know, it's like when you're a kid and you're at the fucking record store, you're just buying the things that, like, you know. The song is called Rush. And
was that another one that was on MTV a lot?
Yeah, it was on MTV all the fucking time.
That's why I'm aware of it.
You know, the less said about this band, the better. It's a embarrassing listen for me.
Yeah, it did nothing for me personally, but I also they had the draw, because if you don't know, the singer was Mick Jones from the Clash,
right?
And I was never a Clash person either, but
I wasn't
a hater.
I like some Clash stuff. I can't say that I'm a hater, because there are some Clash songs that I absolutely love. But I'm not like the guy that's like, yo, the Clash is the greatest band of all time, because I have some friends that will tell you that, and I definitely disagree with them. But I also don't hate them. They just are a band. And
you know me, I'm a metal guy, so like you put on the Clash, I'm like, yeah, okay. You got any Overkill or Testament?
Can we kick this up a notch, please?
And if you got some Rat, that's cool too. But nah, I'm not into this.
So, on the 18th, Third Base, Derelicts of Dialect, and Van Halen for Unlawful Carnal Knowledge came out. Now, we did a whole show, 5 hours, on Van Halen. We never released it, but it's out there. I should pull the audio for where we talk about this record, but really, there are only a couple songs on this record that I can still stand by. But I feel like this is the last time they were actually Van Halen at the same time.
I mean, there were a couple of songs, but some of it was But, well, I'll give them this. They had some hits on this record.
They did.
Pound Cake was big, Top of the World was big, and then Right Now was tremendous.
Was the biggest, probably one of the biggest songs they ever had.
That's some jock jam shit to this day. To this day, they still play that shit as like Teams Take the Field or whatever.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's between that song and Jump are the two songs that I would say are ubiquitous for them. Because
they can't use Gary Glitter anymore.
Third Base
Nope, canceled.
Oh, shit, I just got myself canceled.
Pedophile canceled.
Third Base. You know what? I
want to hear what you got to say about Third Base before I put my 2 cents in.
I should be embarrassed, but I'm not. Because you know what? I like Pete Nice. I don't really care about the other guy.
Search.
Fucking Search, MC Search. I don't care about MC Search. I like Pete Nice because he seems like the kind of guy that probably murdered somebody. And got away with it. And now he's just rapping just to do something else. That's like, I feel like that's kind of where it sits with me. Now, Pop Goes the Weasel is hilarious because they're just clowning on Vanilla Ice. And anybody that's clowning on Vanilla Ice, I'm 100% on board with. The video is hilarious. But if I'm talking about this band, I prefer the record before this with the gas face. But whatever. This record came out. It exists.
Little trivia. Do you know who plays Vanilla Ice in that video?
I don't remember.
It is Henry Rollins.
Is it?
Yes. Yes. Henry Rollins plays Vanilla Ice in the Pop Goes the Weasel video.
Ridiculous.
Yeah. Listen, I make no bones about it. Third Base had some songs.
They had some songs. That's fine. I don't hate on them.
Although, as is always the case with rap, and I know I've said this before on the show, the best is the beef shit. And when they split up,
yeah, they were beefing.
They were beefing with each other, and Pete Nice had a solo record. He did a video, and he had a fat dude dressed up as Search trying to climb through a window. Yo, hilarious. And by the way, somewhere hidden in my apartment somewhere, I actually have a picture with Third Base.
Really?
Yeah, because they performed when I used to work for Red Distribution. Red did a convention for a couple of years, and one year they actually flew in Third Base to perform opening night at the convention.
Huh.
So there's a picture of me with a couple of the other guys I work with Search and Pete Nice. Okay. You know what Pete Nice ended up doing after this?
I don't know. What did he do?
He's a sports memorabilia dealer.
Collector. Okay.
He actually opened a bar in Boston with one of the guys from the Dropkick Murphys. And they were named Best Sports Bar in Boston years ago. I think they've since closed. I'm not sure. But he also got popped for tax fraud.
It happens. It happens.
He did.
Snipes got popped.
He did some baseball memorabilia, and then it looked like some of the stuff might have been faked. So he got busted for fraud also.
Whoops.
But yeah, it's kind of crazy. But this was also over 10 years ago.
So there are two other things that I would want to talk about from June.
Yes.
Anthrax, Attack of the Killer Bees, and Pete Rock, CL Smooth all sold out.
Pete Rock and CL Smooth was definitely on my list because even though it's an EP, there's some real good shit on there.
I love that record.
Yeah. The Mecca and the Soul Brother, which is another one that got play. I don't know if it got played on MTV, but I'm pretty sure it got played a lot on, let me take you back, The Box.
The Box, yes. The Creator is also a good song. And I actually really like Go With The Flow. So that EP was a pretty damn good EP. And
as a matter of fact, The Creator was the single and Mecca and the Soul Brother was the B-side, which ended up probably getting more play than The Creator, and that's why later, the next year, they put out the full length, and the name of the full length was Mecca and the Soul Brother.
Yep. And that record
there was good stuff on here.
Really good. Really good record. So the reason that I know Go With The Flow is because what happens is, especially back in the day for me, is you listen to the two songs that you know, and whatever songs are in between it get play too.
Yep.
So I would put on Mecca and the Soul Brother, and instead of running over to the fucking disc changer to change the track, I would just let it play till I got to The Creator. Yep. And that's why Go With The Flow is one of my favorites on here. But that's also old man shit, because now you can program your damn thing to just play you the songs you want to hear, and you never have to hear anything else.
Yeah. So these are things you used to have to do back in the day.
I'm going to say that Skid Row Slave to the Grind is the most important record that came out in June. And if it's not, it's Pete Rock and CL Smooth. At least for me. I'm talking about for me.
I would say if you're looking at influence,
the Anthrax.
Well, no, I wouldn't even count the Anthrax record because that was just B-sides and extra shit.
But it did have the song with Public Enemy on it.
True, but they had already put that out as a single. Because
Yeah,
I have the 12-inch of it.
it's also got Milk Ode Billy on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's got a bunch of stuff on it, but
I'm the Man 91.
I don't know. I can't. I'm not shitting on it, but I can't really give it credit because it's really just a bunch of extra stuff thrown together.
Okay. So
It's cool. It's got some good songs on it.
Mhm.
Even the live tracks, but yeah, the SOD stuff also. But I mean, they always did stuff like that for B-sides of their singles. Because I have a bunch of that stuff on my computer, like they did. I have them doing Iron Maiden covers, Radiohead covers, the Police covers. They always would do that stuff every record. So I can't really. I think it gets disqualified just because it's a bunch of stuff thrown together, and
Okay.
and
So you're
Bring
gonna
the Noise
say
thing was already out there.
so you're gonna say it's Van Halen because of the Right Now song?
No, because while I wouldn't give it that because I kind of look more for influence. I wouldn't yeah, that song got a lot of play, but I wouldn't. Nobody's saying that inspired me to do something. You know what I mean? Honestly, and maybe I'm partial just because it would be my pick for my favorite of the group, but I'd probably go with the Type O.
See, I can't agree on the Typo just because I haven't spent enough time listening to it, but I'm not the only one on here, so I'll give it to you. Typo, fine. I'm not here to argue.
If the Pete Rock was the full length, then
If
maybe
it was back in the Soul Brothers,
I'd consider it. Yeah, but since it's only an EP, I can't really give it
the whole thing.
the same way with the Anthrax. Like I disqualify it just for that. And the Van Halen, yeah, it had some songs on it, but it had some. That record has some duds.
Trash, some serious trash, and we've detailed that, and eventually one day that will make its way to the airwaves. So,
Yeah, and I can't give it a third base either.
no, absolutely not. So that tops off the first half of the year, and that first half of the year took us almost 2 hours to get through. So let's
and that's the light half because there's heavy shit
coming up. So
because
July.
there's some sleepers in July that we're going to get into right now.
So new blood for me was Green Day in July because they dropped 1039 / smoothed out slappy hours. I'm gonna say that I didn't necessarily listen to this right when it came out, but I found it right around this time. I still enjoy the record, but they really hit their stride with Dookie. It is what it is. Cannibal Corpse, Butchered at Birth, came out the same day. It is what it is. I like the record a little bit. I found it later. I found it probably 5 years later. But it's an okay record. I've spent my time digging through Cannibal Corpse stuff. It's not my favorite. It's not. I don't hate it either.
Yeah.
Digital Underground. This is an EP release. Came out in July. Now, again, we're not really supposed to be talking about EPs, but Same Song is the first time that I saw Tupac do anything. Like, physically, I know that's Tupac. Because that video, he's like one of the main people in the video.
Was that the song that was in the movie? Yes, it was.
It was in the movie for Dan Aykroyd.
Nothing But Trouble.
Nothing But Trouble, yeah.
Tie the Knot and
Road,
Same Song in the movie.
Yeah. Yep. So that is the time frame in which I'm like, all right, I know who that guy is.
Yeah.
I like the song, Same Song. I don't really give a crap about Digital Underground, but I do have a quick story. While we were I was with the camp that I went to, and we were on a trip in Texas. We were at some mall, I think the Galleria Mall in, where is it? Houston, Texas. And we're all just wandering around the mall for a couple hours, and we hear the Digital Underground is in the mall. So we're all running around the mall looking for Digital Underground. I finally find them, and I got the guy to sign the fucking like a signed piece of paper in the store, and I was like super happy. Shock G is the guy that signed it, and like all the kids that were with us was like, "Where's Humpty?" And I'm like, "You fucking dummies! He is Humpty." And he's just laughing at them. And I'm just like, yo, nice to meet you. This is fucking cool. And, you know, I got a signature and I went on my day, and everybody else on the bus, they're all young Jewish white kids, and they're just like blown away. And I'm just like, that was cool. What's next today? Now, the last thing that came out on this same day is directly tied to my existence in Trenton, New Jersey. Poor Righteous Teachers dropped Pure Poverty.
Yep.
That record was so important in my high school because they were all local kids. They didn't necessarily go to Ewing, but we all knew somebody that knew somebody. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So, like, while it's not the most important record to me, it was just very important to me at the time to be listening to it.
Well, one of the things with Poor Righteous Teachers, and there's going to be another release that we get into this month also, is that they're one of those groups that was mixing a lot of jazz beats in.
Yep.
And sampling jazz stuff. And that, I don't know if it was really happening before this time.
I mean, a little bit, but...
I think it really started to blow up more around this time, because there's a couple other records that we'll talk about coming up that go in that direction also. So, like, for me, it started with the record before this, which was Holy Intellect. Right.
With specifically Rock This Funky Joint.
Yes.
But Pure Poverty, if you weren't listening to these first three records, so Holy Intellect, Pure Poverty, and Black Business, in my high school, you were not listening to hip-hop. You had to be listening to these fucking records because these were Trenton kids. So, you know, it's an important record for me in that at the time, you could not get away from it where I lived. For other people, it's a totally different situation. But for me, that was super important. Did I miss anything before we get to this next section?
No, the only other thing I'd mention about Poor Righteous Teachers is that they were
high intellect, like black consciousness.
Well, that's what I was going to say, that they were pro-black, which was... I don't want to say it's a trend. It certainly wasn't a trend or a gimmick, but it was something that was kind of prevalent at that time.
Right. I mean, you had De La Soul, you had Tribe Called Quest,
you had Brand Nubian,
you had
X-Clan,
Leaders of the New School, which we're going to get up to in a few minutes. Like, there were just... It was...
Even Public Enemy was... I mean, Public Enemy was always conscious, but they started to skew a little more... Or be a little more pro-black with some of their stuff, and that was just something that was happening around that time. But it also was different because it wasn't how can I put it? I don't want to say aggressive. It wasn't. It was a very different style compared to like when we were talking about NWA. It
was educational.
It was educational, and that's something. I'm sure I talked about it before. It's something that to me is missing from
the landscape of hip hop right now.
Yeah, absolutely. That nobody, everybody's busy mumbling. Nobody's trying to be educational.
Nobody's saying anything.
Nobody's trying to be positive. You can be pro-black and also be positive.
Absolutely.
And I don't think that it comes across as much anymore. But it also didn't alienate anybody, because here I am, a white dude, talking about it. I love Brand Nubian.
Yeah, same.
I love a lot of it.
But I love it. I loved it.
But, it didn't alienate me. It wasn't so over the top that you couldn't relate to it.
So that came out all that stuff came out on July 1st.
Right. Now, by the way, there's another record on July 1st that doesn't even make these lists because it's so underground, but it's one of my favorite records of all time.
Okay.
And it's by a metal band called Cyclone Temple.
Never heard of it.
Yeah. Came out on Combat Records. The record was called I Hate Therefore I Am. And it came out that same day, July 1st.
Okay.
Random note, the guitarist was a big black dude. But his right-hand picking was insane.
Mm-hmm.
And you can draw a direct line from bands like this to bands like Seven Dust that were mixing like heavy riffing with more soulful type of vocals.
Okay. Can you do me a favor? Rip that CD and send it to me?
Oh, I'll have it. I'll send it to you for sure. They put out a couple of discs, but this was the first one. I got it when I was doing college radio, and I got to see them, and it was an awesome show.
Okay.
And they're one of those bands, like they got some Headbangers Ball play because they had one song that was kind of a power ballad-ish thing that was played on Headbangers Ball.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really it. I think it was called Words Are Just Words. But they never got much support because Combat Records put the record out, and then eventually they got bought and they got lost in the shuffle. They put out a couple of records after that on some small labels, but they never had any kind of tour support or anything, so they never really
kind of fell apart.
Yeah, but they're one of those bands. There's like a real underground thing. Oddly enough, one day I am going somewhere, probably to band practice or something, and I end up jumping in the car with Martin from Billy Club.
Uh-huh.
And he happens to have the CD in his car. I'm like, dude, like the only other person I know that has ever even heard of this fucking band, and it happens to be my singer. And he's like, yo, I fucking love this disc. And I'm like, dude, it's one of my favorites. But it's one of those things. It's just like it's so under the radar for most people, but I'll definitely send it to you. I still really enjoy it. Okay. And it just happened to come out on that same day. So that's it for this week, or maybe 2 weeks. I don't know. See how it splits up.
Yeah.
It's 4 a.m. or something. Has anybody mentioned that we like to talk?
We just talk.
TheUpgradePodcast.net for all of your listening needs and social media needs. And I am Gary Muttley. He is Len Carmichael. We will talk to you guys again soon. Thanks for listening. Peace.
Peace.